In the past couple years, there have been a few games that have moments where they seem to reach beyond their own window. These window-breaking games do this as a means of subverting expectations of the player by fourth wall breaking in a very literal sense. They create unconventional narratives that involve the player literally, or make a character within the game seem closer to reality than the rest. Compared to just clever gameplay or commentary dialogue that spell out self-awareness, like in most other metagames, these window breakers have moments that occur externally from the game window, which makes the events of the game feel like they're an authentic part of reality, rather than just being displayed on your computer screen. When it appears like the game is reaching outside of what is normally viewed as the bounds of the game itself, it's a much more thrilling and unexpected moment that impacts the player greatly by making them feel like they're a part of the game experience rather than just playing the experience. These three games I'd like to talk about create uniquely mind-blowing moments by reaching beyond their own windows, starting with Undertale. You should already know exactly what I'm talking about when I say Undertale and subverting expectations. Up to the end of the game, Undertale already has enough things going for it. Its unique and amazing gameplay, wacky and clever writing, its memorable characters, fantastic soundtrack, and so on. But then after you fight Asgore, the king of monsters you must defeat in order to escape from the underground, you're hit with one of the biggest twists that no one could have ever expected. Flowey, the flower that harasses you at the beginning, appears out of nowhere, takes control of the souls, and closes the game, by which I mean the Undertale program running closes itself without player input. I am positive Undertale is not the first to have done this, but I'm fairly certain that I speak for many of you watching when I say that I have never seen a game do this before. It wasn't even a concept in my head that the video game itself would ever shut down on its own. This is such a huge part of what made Undertale so popular, still to this day. That moment's so special, so unique, so unbelievable that you have to tell your friends to just play it without any preconceptions. It's a shocking twist, but it's also used very effectively for characterizing just how evil Flowey really is. Remember that the idea is that Flowey is the one who closes the game, and for being such an unconventional surprise, I did at first have a genuine feeling of confusion and disbelief in the form of believing Flowey is a real entity in my computer.
Oh no, Flowey, 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 no, 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 no.
What? That didn't crash.
Flowey just turned off the game.
Flowey just turned off the game.
As silly as that sounds, that's exactly the purpose behind the game closing by itself. Toby Fox doesn't just use a cool twist that no one was going to possibly expect, he's also brilliant in using it to put Flowey in a position of power and control that is very real to the player. It makes him a threat to you in a way that could not be accomplished by any other means. It makes his control of the game or world inside your computer seem legitimate. And it makes the already horrifying battle that is Omega Flowey even more horrifying. Imagine if the game didn't close itself. Imagine if it just cut straight to the Omega Flowey battle. Would it be as impactful of a battle to you? Would Omega Flowey feel as threatening just by appearance alone? Undertale was the big one that introduced this idea of breaking the fourth wall via external elements with its simple little moment of shutting itself down. But now, any game that attempts to provide a similar experience is automatically compared to Undertale as if Undertale is its own genre definer. While I do use Undertale and Flowey as a comparison to elements and moments in the next two games, that doesn't detract from OneShot and DDLC being window breakers in their own unique and groundbreaking ways. OneShot poses as a very simple indie game about a cat person thingy transported to a world in which he is tasked with returning the sun to the center of that world to restore the world's light. He travels through the world interacting with NPCs and solving puzzles involving an inventory of items that can be combined and used for specific situations. But the game has a little bit more to it than just that. You eventually come to learn that Nico, the cat thing, has a guide who happens to be you, the literal player, named not by an inputted character name at the start of the adventure, but rather the game references your computer's user folder. And what solidifies that OneShot characterizes you as the person actually playing the game is that you receive desktop pop-ups from a character referred to as the Entity, who gives you hints for puzzles. But these particular puzzles aren't for Nico. They're for you directly as a character now associated with the game, and these puzzles take place outside of the game in the context of you playing it on a computer. OneShot involves you by having you search for a secret code in a text file of your documents folder laid there by the game. It changes your wallpaper to an image required to solve a floor tile puzzle. It has you drag the window of the game itself outside of the computer's display to reveal a password, and in the final chapter of the game, with the Entity trying to prevent you from completing Nico's task by trapping him in a maze, you must use a second program application the game also plants in your documents folder, which changes into different transparent notes that provide plot exposition, but when lined up properly with the main game window also reveal the way out of each maze. Once again, I had no idea an application window could even be transparent within the window itself. This wasn't as much of a shocking unexpected twist as Undertale closing itself, but it was certainly an interesting and unconventional method of figuring out how to solve a bunch of mazes. As you progress through the game, these external puzzles and the game's narrative will ease closer and closer to the idea that the world of OneShot isn't exactly as it seems. This all leads into the reveal that the world is a simulation on your computer, created by the Entity. Nico, however, is not part of the simulation. He is a part of reality brought into the simulation from whatever world he originates from. The reason the Entity doesn't want you to complete Nico's task is you cannot both save Nico and the simulation world. In order to return Nico home, the world must be destroyed by shattering the sun, or Nico must be trapped in the simulation, not able to return home in order to save it. Conflicted, the Entity tries and fails to stop you, leading into the final choice made by you, the choice you only get one shot at. Whichever choice you pick, you'll be locked out of being able to restart the game, being very literal with the idea of one shot. You can, however, change this fact for both endings by deleting a save file that is hidden in, once again, your documents folder. The final puzzle, allowing you to go against the game's constant message of having only one shot. Similar to how Flowey is characterized as in control in Undertale, OneShot characterizes the player as in control through the idea that you can control more than just what's in the game window. The concept that all these puzzles and events of the game share is that they contextualize OneShot as a Microsoft Windows application. The game requires you to treat it as an application on your computer by having you play certain puzzles of the game outside of the game window in order to solve those puzzles. And by contextualizing itself as a game very directly through its gameplay, OneShot brings its story of a simulation world on your computer closer to reality. While Undertale has one very simple moment of window breaking, OneShot contains multiple situations where you must deliberately play outside of the game's border. And all these moments go together to develop its story that uses this concept of window breaking as a core theme. Ultimately, OneShot reaching beyond its own window is a more significant and integral part of the experience it delivers. Doki Doki Literature Club is a visual novel game involving the main character joining his school's literature club and getting to know its members, which includes Sayori, your longtime friend, the cheery and peppy one, Natsuki, the cute but thick-skinned one, Yuri, the shy and reserved one, and Monica, the club president. DDLC is initially a very trite and seemingly uninspired visual novel. Nothing really happens besides sharing poems each day with the girls. It starts to drag on, not having anything interesting happen at all. That is, of course, until this happens. The game will cut to end and start over, except this time, Sayori doesn't exist, and the other characters will act like she never existed at all. Furthermore, things start to become eerie. text gets corrupted, the girls will reveal darker personalities, the poem minigames will be broken, visual jump scares and static will occur. Yuri in particular will start to act especially creepy, acting more and more obsessed with the main character. All the while, Monika starts to act like she knows more than she leads on, appearing on top of the text box, talking to the player via a pop-up, being aware of the day cutting off to the next poem minigame, controlling the options given to the player. Eventually, Yuri will end up being so obsessed with you that she ends up, well, I think the footage speaks for itself. Monika will then come in, finally revealing that she's aware of it all being a video game, and that she was the one taking control, making the other girls bend to their darker feelings, deleting them from the game entirely, eventually deleting the rest of the world too, all to get you to pay attention to her. Not the main character, but you the player. In truth, she acts like she wishes she didn't have to do any of this, that it's the game's fault for preventing her from being able to connect to you. Throughout the game, she expresses that she isn't very assertive like the other girls, that she can't stop a fight between Yuri and Natsuki without Sayori's help, that she can't prevent the other girls from expressing more interest in the main character. Hell, there's a huge blatant contrast to how she's presented as one of the girls to choose, like in a typical visual novel, but then the poem minigame has you only choosing between Sayori, Natsuki, and Yuri. The whole time, Monika never gets a chance to be the choice of the player. The game acts as an antagonist to Monika, forcing her to work behind the scenes trying to make the other girls less desirable, eventually removing them completely so that the only option to the player is just Monika. Now all of these moments within DDLC that I've shown are still just contained within the game's window. From what you've seen so far, Doki Doki Literature Club is just another metagame that fools around with dialogue and visuals. But there is a window-breaking mechanic that is actually always present, even at the very beginning of the game. It's just not revealed until the final chapter. At the very end, as Monika explains everything to you, she mentions that there has always been a folder in the game's directory specifically for the characters. File representations of all 4 girls, which is something you could have interacted with at any point while playing. And in order to set things right, you must delete Monika's character file yourself, which will lead into the conclusion of the game where Monika will accept that she can't try to trap you. While the character folder is a very small component of DDLC being about Monika's sentience as a character in the game, it does make up a big concept of labeling the girls as just simple files in that video game and nothing more. It's what makes Monika so special in a similar sense that Flowey seems special for being perceived as capable of closing the game. Monika is just a basic file on your computer, she shouldn't be able to do anything, but she as a file within the narrative of DDLC is perceived as capable of taking control of the game, deleting other files, and communicating to the player directly with texts and images. Doki Doki Literature Club plays on a much darker story of self-awareness, having a character feel like she's trapped in the game she's a part of, trying to reach out to the player because she knows what she is, and she believes that the only real thing interacting with her fake world will somehow be able to help her. DDLC has a lot of great moments that fool with the player and twist their expectations, but none of the subverting dialogue or unexpected visuals connects the world of the game to reality as effectively as the character folder existing in the game's directory does. The character files are tied to the game, but their location is dissociated from where DDLC is played. You're interacting with actual computer files in Windows Explorer, making their representation as part of the game more real than, say, if you interacted with a fake desktop within the game window. With the file representing Monika for what she truly is, it makes the whole story of her wanting to have your undivided attention seem like something actually happening in reality. That her file in the game on your computer is a real-life entity that wants you. It makes Monika seem closer to tangibility, and because she wants to be tangible and free from the game in the first place, she can seemingly unsettle the player with her motives that would normally be viewed as just part of a video game. Doki Doki Literature Club truly is a horror about the game reaching beyond its window. Any game can break the fourth wall and call itself a video game. It can feed you dialogue that self-acknowledges game elements, or it can play around with gameplay in unexpected ways that make it seem like the player is no longer in control. But what Undertale, OneShot, and DDLC do differently is they take it even further by having situations that are played or experienced outside of the game window. For these three, by having moments that exist beyond the conventionally perceived borders of a game, and by using computer functions that aren't normally associated with games as a form of gameplay or as a narrative event, these window breakers are just more genuine. They are more genuine in breaking the fourth wall, they are more genuine in being meta. As much as you know it's not really happening in any metagame, or any video game for that matter, these come the closest to making you have the slightest belief that maybe it is happening. These are just three examples of how games can push the limits of bridging themselves to reality and to the player, making it feel like the game is a more alive experience. And I'd like to believe we have much more to look forward to in what future games can learn from Undertale, OneShot, and Doki Doki Literature Club, that can perhaps create something that seems even more genuine, realistic, and alive. But hey, that's just my perspective.